Hey guys, welcome back, welcome to the channel. Today we are diving into a hands-on tutorial where we are building some classic Warhammer 40k terrain with a little grimdark twist, and I'll be showing you step by step how to create some Gothic style ruins perfect for your tabletop battles, along with a Nurgle-themed tank not rolling anymore through the chaos of the ruins. To top it off, we'll be crafting a toxic pool, bubbling with corruption, bringing that extra bit of plague-ridden atmosphere to the battlefield. So whether you're new to terrain building or looking to add some flavor to your Warhammer 40k setup, stick around. So for this terrain piece, I'll be using half of a Warhammer Conquest Nurgle Plague Burst Crawler to add these chaos vibes to the ruins. I also use some 3D printed elements and some acrylic cast from Green Stuff World, and I have some other videos where there's a step-by-step breakdown how to create these molds. So I was a little bit lazy, and if to really sell the idea of a tank buried under rubble, we're going to fill the half-cut model with plaster, and this will create a solid realistic impression, making it look like the Plague Burst Crawler is truly crushed beneath the ruins. And the plaster and the parts will help us to blend the tank into this whole scene, giving it the battle-worn, abandoned feel that is perfect for Warhammer 40k setting. So before I dive into building, I usually take a moment to draw a little sketch of my idea. This helps me visualize the layout and think critically about the playability of the terrain. I strongly believe in the principle that form follows function, and if I can easily position my models on the terrain base, then it really doesn't serve its purpose. So for this project, I want to ensure there is enough space to accommodate at least 5 to 10 32mm base size models inside these ruins. It's all about creating a battlefield that not only looks great but also enhances the gameplay experience. And for this particular purpose, I will also add some sandbags to the base, as I always wanted to create sandbags, and roughly outline these kind of toxic excretion of the Nurgle tank. So I will cover this whole area here with rubble, but it has to be playable, so I will keep it quite flat. And I have a footprint, so I can use the footprint rules and also the ruin rules, and then I will transfer this whole idea to my, actually in this case, wooden base. It's a multiplex board, so this laminated wood, very sturdy, 3mm, and I will roughly position the pieces I have, but of course doing all the detailed work later. And also position a few extra pieces on top of the Nurgle of the Plague Burst Crawler to see how much space I really have and what's needed, so even with different base sizes, as you can see here. So this all serves the purpose of really having, in my understanding, good looking piece of terrain, which is really playable. So once I have my sketch, the next step is to transfer the rough outline onto a larger multiplex board, and then I later carefully cut out the shapes using a saw, making sure to follow my design as closely as possible. After cutting, I will grind down the edges to remove any splinters or rough spots using either sandpaper or grinder here. Both tools work well since multiplex is hard but only 3mm thick in this case, which I use for bases, making it quite manageable to shape. This ensures we have a clean and safe base to work with as we will continue building our ruins here. So I run this via the grinder, and as you can see here, you can bend it, yes, but you need some force to do that. It will also not soak up a lot of water when we will later use the sculptor mold for that purpose. So for this purpose, I will use and make my own sculptor mold or modeling plaster, just using a few affordable materials. Instead of buying the expensive stuff, you're going to use cellulose insulation, the kind you get in these bulk cheap 25kg bags, and some concrete plaster, which will later mix with water, a bit of glue to give it some extra strength. And this do-it-yourself mix is perfect for building up terrain like our Gothic ruins, and gives great texture for these kind of Warhammer 40k grimdark things. And As you can see, these cellulose fibers are very small. No? You don't have to tear them apart. They already come in these fine fibers you can immediately use for the sculptor mold. So now let's talk about the mixing our homemade sculptor mold. For this we'll combine 2 parts plaster with 1 part cellulose fiber, and we'll add some water until we achieve a smooth paste. Usually there's 2 parts of this plaster, 1 part fiber, and this consistency is key here. It should be thick enough to hold together, but still easy to spread on our base. If you find that the mixture isn't holding together as it should, simply add more plaster and water to adjust the consistency. So next I'll be using some grass tufts blister boxes as molds forms to create a flat layer that reassembles concrete. This is a cheap and quite convenient way to repurpose materials you may already have lying around. By pouring our pure mixture into these boxes, so without the cellulose fiber, we can easily shape the concrete layer. Once it dries, we'll be able to break it apart to simulate rubble, adding that realistic touch to the terrain. It's just a fantastic method for achieving great textures and creating these battlefield effects without spending a lot of extra money. So here you can see me just pouring the plaster into these forms, and with a very old brush you won't be able to use again. I'll just poke into and just try to get the concrete mix evenly spread inside these little molds, and to just leave it to dry for based on the manual. So if you have a heater inside, you can just put this mold on a heater. It will dry a little bit faster, and if it's a little bit more liquid like this, it will be more brittle, which is convenient for our purpose. So now I will add a few of the cellulose fibers to create the final sculptor mold mixture. I know that there are many videos out there just specifically describing different ways of creating sculptor mold, even toilet paper, things like that. I mean, it's all cellulose fiber, but here I want to show you the do's and don'ts. The glue is not really necessary, especially if you use resin and forced plaster, but for me it's just I'm used to it, to add a little bit of glue just to give it some extra strength, but it's not really needed, and as you can see it's not much. I don't know if it really makes a difference, but I stick to my routine. So a little bit of water, and I will show you the difference if you add not enough plaster in a second. So stir, use your hands, and please always wear gloves, as this concrete plaster can be quite aggressive to skin. And here is a good example of the right mixture. Is some clumpy, soft clay-like mixture, not very watery, but still it keeps together, it holds the form. And on the right side you see here these quite brittle. It's still very soft and wet, but it's not. It has no coherence, and it's not so consistent. You can still use it because it looks more rough. So you really have to decide how much should I add for the purpose in my terrain piece. So I will just mix this together, and here you can see there's really a lot of water in there, but the water is not so important. It's really the plaster, and that's the trick here. So this is something I have done for a while ago, and you see it's very, very hard and very, very stable material. I can scratch it with a spoon. It is absolutely not coming off, holding together. And in comparison here, really you see it here, I knock on the green stuff resin, the acrylic resin, and you see it splinters, it breaks apart, which is nice, by the way, because it creates some interesting surface, but it breaks apart easily, and the other stuff is not. So even heavy use with your models or storing it won't be really an issue. I also use really a small amount, and as you can imagine, it's just really a small part of this 25 kilogram bag. It's just really it will be there for ages. So there's enough material. Even share it with your friends, so it will just be like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kilograms for $1, 2, 3 dollars, euros, whatsoever. So here I'm showing you that you can even blend it later. So I put fresh plaster on top of dried plaster, and with a just wet brush, my old brush here, without any shape, I carefully just tip it on the sides, and I blend it to the existing surface. And it's absolutely easy to do that. There will be no edges, no harsh overlays. You can easily blend it with some water to the existing parts, and it will also stick, so it fixates everything. So now it's time to fill nearly the entire surface of our wooden base with the plaster mixture, pressing it flat while ensuring we leave some rough texture for realism. I'll then later position the model of the plague burst crawler into the plaster and fill in some sections around it to help blend it into the terrain. I've intentionally left many pieces unglued, so it looks like a corroded and destroyed tank, more as it is itself, adding to that grimdark aesthetics we are aiming for. So really thoroughly mix your plaster or sculptor mold mix, and smear it on top of the wooden base. So if you use 3mm and not too much water, it won't it won't be an issue for the wood. So I have used this so many times, and I never have like bending or whatever wood here due to the moisture in the mix. So I'll really press this down, and next I will create a little crater for the toxic pool, and showing that this is higher, at its higher sides to contain the liquid resin we will use later. I plan to paint this section in an upcoming video before pouring the resin. Keep in mind that the resin takes a while to dry. The whole plaster takes a while to dry, and you can place it on a heater, and this will speed up the whole process. This way you can go back to working on other projects, or on this project next day. That's actually a great option to have a few projects going on simultaneously, so you can always be productive during your hobby time while waiting for things to dry. I press with my fingers, I press the pull down, and I create a little bit of an edge. Honestly, I'm just aiming towards like 5mm. And here I will think, as you can see, that this model is not complete. I will really use these parts here. I'm not even so careful with removing mold lines or filling lines here, because later I will put so much rubble on top of it you won't even see it. So I smear down this whole model with plaster. By the way, later if you paint it, it can look like rust if corroded. You will see this later. And here, so you won't be able to see something. So really with the brush I press this into the parts of the model which I want to be really hidden, and I want to create this kind of heavy damaged old look. So take your time, position it, and honestly remember, asymmetric is always interesting. If you would put the full assembled tank, it would look somehow wrong for this specific purpose. With the end of the brush here I drill a little bit of a canal from the tank towards my little toxic pool, and I will cover the rest of the model with this plaster. Of course, I mentioned before I use 3D printed parts, but you can use, and I would definitely do that if they wouldn't be so expensive, not the 3D printed parts. All of these parts are free. You can look on different 3D printing sites, of course only for your own purpose, not for selling, so they are very close to the design of Games Workshop. And I break these pieces apart because it creates more realism to the overall terrain piece, especially covering a little part where the pool will be. So here again, acrylic resin from Green Stuff World. Break this apart, and try to think that I go bigger parts, smaller parts, and rubble. Please never use only one size of rubble, it will not look very realistic. So later we will also use some stones, real stones and everything, but for now I want to focus on the bigger parts. Some parts should be on top of the plague burst crawler, some parts not, and then I will start to think about and reposition the 3D printed building parts. I have also some, I think it's called greebles in English. I was thinking about adding a few parts here, but then I decided against it because it blocks too much path for models to be there. So I have not glued these parts yet. I want to see if my idea is still possible to implement, and I just try to add these models, at these parts, and then later glue them together and put them on top of the plaster, and with some super glue attach those. The sculptor mold is not sticky enough to really keep the models itself on the base. So, for the next step of this Nurgle ruins project, I simply begin by breaking apart the floor pieces and arranging them irregularly around the tank base. This gives a more chaotic, war-torn look to the whole setup. Afterwards, I position the glued ruin pieces on the board using super glue and a little bit of the plaster, carefully building a plaster around the bottom segments for added texture and stability. I also dip and sprinkle a little bit of the mixture on top of the tank and the pieces just to create some texture I can later paint, even as rust or whatever. And I cover the sides, as you can see here, where I have missed a few parts. The other plaster has already been quite dry, but that's not an issue at all. Just cover all the remaining pieces. So I will rearrange the ruins, and here we'll go up and embed them more or less with a little bit of super glue on the lower part, and attach to the board. Even if it's a little bit unstable at this point, it will get hard in a few moments and give you enough stability to work with. I also add a few remaining pieces of the tank itself I had left over, just to add some more details to the overall base. Here. No. So I also, and I do this quite often, is checking really if the other pieces I have broken apart will fit. I'm pretty much overdoing it here because I'm not entirely sure how I want to position them, and again I will not glue them on top of the tank, as I wanted to paint the tank first and then add the pieces there. Next, I start forming small sandbags using air drying modeling compound. That's a very soft material, so it's easy to shape. There are some great tutorials online. You can check them out, but I'm keeping mine very simple by flattening little orbs of the compounds, drawing out the corners and gluing them together with either super glue or tacky glue. If you use super glue, well, also tacky glue, but it's not that problematic. Please do not put the super glue directly on top of the sandbags or in the crevices you can see later. That sounds stupid, but the problem is if you want to use the white material directly to stain it for sandbags with animals or oil paints, it will create a different surface and it will look very odd, because then you have these kind of speckles of super glue which are not really covered, as the super glue surface repels the oil and animals. And you could theoretically just use something to stain the sandbags themselves. As you can see, I plan to prime the whole model, so it's not important. But this is just a little advice. If you want to speed up the process, use the white material and just put some oil and enamels on it, you will have an odd looking surface. With some of the sandbags I just put a little dent in there to mimic the real sandbag here. But honestly, this is really very basic way of doing it. Theoretically, you can draw a fine line or even press in little seams in the sandbags, but for this particular project that's not necessary. I will also break a few of the acrylic resin parts apart and now spread super glue over it more or less randomly to really bring everything together. So now it's time to add some realism by incorporating real stones, rubble and debris to the ruins. This is a small selection of stones and rubble I've collected during holidays or simply on the street. And when creating rubble, a good rule of thumb is to go from the big to the small in terms of size. It just looks more realistic. So a helpful tip is to use the natural materials you've collected outside. Grey stones, for example, can be found as loose grit from sidewalks or construction sites, and while you can buy these in bulk from a do-it-yourself store or Baumarkt, you will probably end up with more than you need. So I prefer to gather and store these materials in jars, which I have picked up cheaply online. For placement, I focus on areas near the objects, piling rubble around and on top of the tank. It just looks more realistic, a little bit to the sandbags. And here the grey ones look extremely similar to the red ones. The red ones I have bought for like 3-4 euro. The grey ones are just like collected, and they come in all different sizes. It's very convenient, but it's just very expensive. So from my perspective, just collect them outside. Sometimes you have some fiber in there as well, adding a more realistic touch. So just cheap. This is a spray can cap I use to store, and these are from, I think, AliExpress or Temu. Plastic ones, very cheap, just like 10-20 cents per piece. So that's really helpful to store, and they won't shatter easily. I think this is even from a holiday from a beach on the Canary Isles, if I remember correctly. So before applying the mix, before to fix everything in place, I usually use water and the glue mix. This is like 30% glue, 70% water, and it comes in these. You can store them in these little 75 or 100 milliliter bottles. And you see, I just randomly, closer to the objects, spread the stones a little bit on top of the tank, close to the ruins, and this draws everything together with the printed and cast pieces. I then use a little bit fine sand and grit and finer stones, and just to add a little bit more realism and try to get some different surfaces besides the already great plaster surface you've just done before. So this is extremely fragile at the beginning, so now we have to fix it. And before we do this, before applying this mix, I spray the board with isopropanol to break the surface tension. This helps the diluted glue flow better into all recesses and pores. While it's especially useful for fine materials like flock, sand or cork, it's still helpful here, and why take chances when it's so simple. Isopropanol can be bought in canisters for a few euros, and if you do any 3D resin printing, you might already have some at hand. The next step involves breaking apart the cast plaster we made earlier, and as you'll notice, it breaks apart easily, making it perfect for creating convincing rubble. One of the advantages of using plaster is that you get two distinct surfaces, a smooth side below and a very coarse side. I personally prefer the smooth surface to more control, and I manually add scratches, nicks and other damage to give it a worn, battle-torn appearance. By customizing this kind of rubble this way, you can really capture the randomness and destruction that fits the theme. The coarse side can work great too, depending on the look you're going for, but it's all about mixing textures to keep things more or less visually interesting. So, and here we have our final product. I'm really happy with how it turned out. It's versatile enough to fit seamlessly into a Chaos theme board, a Sector Imperialis board, or even a simple cityscape. I have rearranged the sandbags a little bit to make it look more damaged, and as the sandbags have their before and not afterwards setup. Here this area will be this toxic lake. I've added a few pieces of rubble, and below that plate the toxic waste will flow into this little area. Also, I have a few pieces of rubble super glued directly straight to the model, to the tank piece, just to ensure they really stay there. And as you can see, I'm scratching the surface here to demonstrate how resistant it is. Of course, if you really try to damage it, you can, but for regular gameplay with miniatures, it's very unlikely to get scratched or harmed. So in the next video, I'll move on to painting this piece and adding the toxic lake effect. So stay tuned for the part of the process. Please subscribe if you liked that video, and I hope to see you next for the painting process. Thank you very much for your time.